If you've ever spent any time on forums like Reddit or 4chan, you'll stumble across a bevy of posts about young, lonely, depressed individuals, particularly males. My initial thought was that those kinds of guys have always existed, and now they finally have a platform to speak about their emotions. But these stories have become increasingly more frequent. The suicide gender gap currently sits at 4 to 1 male to female. Depression, loneliness, anxiety, suicide has all spiked in the past decade for both of the genders. This has to do with the crisis of meaning and loneliness. First, some philosophy. Existential nihilism. When we realize there is no inherent meaning to our lives, human existence is meaningless. Nietzsche believed we can create our own meaning, but it's up to us to maintain them. Jung, Nietzsche's student, tried solving the problem of humans creating meaning by interfacing with an empty world by claiming humans are in fact not capable of creating meaning. Rather, we interpret meaning from the world and transform it. Despair is crucial to existence. For Kierkegaard, the only way to work through anxiety and despair is acceptance of the cosmic absurdity of reality, and to live by faith. Faith is simply the courage to attempt a meaningful existence in the face of a meaningless world. A more pessimistic line of thinking is that of cosmic nihilism. There is no truth or meaning in the world. The ones we construct, like love, hope, religion, those are simply copes to avoid our empty reality. In both branches of nihilism, morality either exists as a subjective creation or as an extension of the illusion of the self. Those who believe that God is dead have no foundation or use for good or for evil. What existentialists get right is the absurdity of the world. Around this time of year, last year, the clown world meme became popular. The meme was a Pepe named Honkler dressed as a clown and honking a horn. The meaning behind the meme was that the political landscape had gotten so absurd we might as well laugh about it. The state of the Western world isn't merely a tragedy, it's a comedy. I don't know who wrote the following post, but they explain clown world perfectly. They wrote, "Taking the honk pill is a declaration of freedom and an act of philosophical transcendence. It's the simultaneous acknowledgement of the black pill, with the decision to avoid its attendant nihilism. By consciously choosing to seek joy, to seek adventure, to seek lighthearted and self-amusement in the midst of all the chaos. The honk pill is a philosophy unto itself, and perhaps, in these trying times, it is just the medicine the world needs." The black pill, for those who don't know, is the realization of pessimism or defeatism. It falls in line with the philosophy of cosmic existential nihilism. Clown world reflects the teachings of philosopher Albert Camus, who believes when faced with soul-crushing nihilism, we should embrace the emptiness of the absurd. Reality absolutely is absurd and indifferent. The second law of thermodynamics states the entropy, or chaos, in the universe is ever increasing. But that doesn't mean we cannot achieve order locally. That's what Jordan Peterson means when he's saying his slogan, "Clean your room." About 90% of Jordan Peterson's audience is male. For the uninformed, Peterson is a professor of psychology at the University of Toronto. He became popular on the internet for his talks about personal responsibility and the concept of truth and purpose. He is well known for suggesting to his audience to clean the rooms because your room is a small but immediate part of the cosmos that you have control over. Sorting your room is not a trivial matter. You have to set it up in such a way that it facilitates a purpose, and that requires finding a purpose that is worth leaving the room. His message is that the world is full of chaos, and all individuals must find purpose in order to create order so that we do not suffer in the chaos. He proposes that women have an immediate purpose of reproduction. This, of course, is not their only purpose, but it is apparent, important, and immediate. That's one more than men have. Because men have the luxury of waiting to have a family even as late as 50 years old. He tells his audience, primarily young men, that it's no wonder people are resentful and bitter. Life is tragic. The way out of that is to accept that, and to accept mortality by accepting challenge and responsibility. The only alternative is impulsive pleasure. You want a meaning that justifies suffering, so pick something worth it. People will carry a heavy load if they get to pick the weight. But why lift a load if there's nothing in it for you? Men are attacked for much of the qualities that make them masculine, i.e. toxic masculinity. If society tells them they are pathological and oppressive, men get no credit for responsibility and refuse to play. Their life then becomes meaningless, full of self-content and nihilism. For the typical person, they'll fall apart if they don't have a load to carry. This is why suicide and opioid abuse is so high among middle-aged white men in the US. They lose their job, they're done. They despise themselves, develop depression and chronic pain syndrome. Then they treat the pain with painkillers. The only way to know what you're doing is meaningful is if it's on the edge between order and chaos. Chaos is where things are so complex you cannot handle it, and order is where things are so rigid it's restrictive. In between is a meaningful place where you're partly stabilized and partly curious, and you are operating in a manner that increases your scope of knowledge. The same thing can be said about traditionalism and progressivism. When tradition falls apart, the society ends up drowning under its own weight. If things become too fundamental, things become too restrictive, then everyone becomes like clones in a prison. You need 4 components to craft the antidote to suffering. First, purpose. Something that matters that you need to do. The second, individual capacity. The ability to realize progress, at least in some small part, towards that purpose. This imbues a sense of control within one's life. The other 2 are communal purpose and communal capacity. We need that feeling that we're a part of a group fighting for something greater, and that we are able to mobilize the community in order to get things done. There's been a degradation over the past half century on all 4 items. There's been an increase in the feeling that you do not matter. You don't count, none of it matters, it's out of your control, you're a victim, and you're not responsible for your decisions. As for the communal duality, the reality is that most of us found that through religion. Most people went to church or synagogue or mosque. Others found it through local clubs, but even those are being replaced with online groups which, good as they may be, don't always fill the same gap. This in part explains the increase in political partisanship. People are investing meaning into politics that it didn't have a few decades ago. States and localities take primary responsibility for schools, transportation, and criminal justice. If people were motivated to vote primarily by the idea that their vote might decide the outcome, they would far more likely cast the ballot in small local elections, where their odds of being the decisive vote are much higher. But that's not the case recently. The gap between national politics and state and local politics has been growing sharply. The political tribalism that's broken out has given some of us a sense of meaning. We don't just disagree on issues anymore, we despise each other. That's why people are on Twitter and Facebook yelling at each other. Not because it's productive, but because it makes them feel something. The most connected society in history has become the loneliest. In fact, there was a study out of Norway that found connecting depressive people together in a group and accomplishing something within the group was twice as effective as chemical antidepressants. Many of the men who become addicted to video games receive a hollow version of the things they used to get from society, but that they no longer receive. They used to get a tribe, a sense of status, sense that they are capable. The other thing men become addicted to via the internet is porn. There they again receive a hollow version of intimacy. How can we be so lonely with instant access to friends and family via social media? Social media is an addictive machine designed to immerse us in status and neglect what is valuable in our life, like love, purpose, and meaningful connection. Don't get me wrong, the solution is not to give up on social media entirely. It is, of course, a double-edged sword. It comes with massive drawbacks and benefits. We have to limit the time and value that we invest in it and revalue face-to-face community. Back to nihilism. It was cemented as a popular philosophy in the 1700s, shortly after the scientific revolution. Science allows us to make sense of the universe, but we are left confronting the arbitrary nature of existence. Pure rationalism of the universe furthers the insignificance of our lives. Nietzsche makes the claim that God is dead and that we have killed him. When confronting the bleak emptiness of nihilism, there are a few alternate solutions. You could commit suicide, but that only negates the problem rather than solving it. You could ignore it altogether, but that's not quite possible without the third option, coping. For Pascal, once you have passed the point where diversions no longer sustain you, the only recourse is to turn to God. Whether you believe God is real or is simply a cope is besides the point. It is indisputable that living by faith imbues purpose in the life of the individual. Like Kierkegaard, we can interpret this absurdity of the universe as a part of God's plan. Contrary to popular belief, God is not incompatible with modern science. In fact, those who made paramount discoveries during the scientific revolution, like René Descartes, Robert Boyle, and Isaac Newton, all were devout Christians. Science is just a method for acquiring knowledge. Though many scientists use science as a basis for metaphysical philosophy based on materialism, opposite of them there are plenty of intelligent theologian apologeticists who have rationally defended the existence of God. I might make a video summarizing their points later. My advice? Spend less time on social media, video games, and porn. Spend more time in face-to-face community. Clean your room, make meaningful connections, seek responsibility, find a load to carry. If you do all these things, you are on your way to discovering meaning and fellowship. This has been a huge topic and I probably have not done it justice. I might end up revisiting this in the future. That's all I got. Thanks for listening.